In today's show, rounding up the latest NBA trade rumors. Can the Blazers get involved with the madness? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, I've gone to the rumor mill and I've rounded up the latest scuttlebutt from all of the trade news, whirlwinds, speculation, whispers, all of those things. Not really whispers. These are things that are written down on the internet. So we're going to talk Trae Young. We're going to talk Anthony Davis. We're going to talk the sort of quiet front of Giannis Antetokounmpo. Who's open for business? Who's trying to make moves to be buyers at the market? And finally, how can the Trailblazers get involved, if at all? And will they attempt to make a move? We will get into all of that. We will start with some news that was reported today. I want to say this show's coming out later than normal because life got in the way. Thanks for understanding that life can sometimes get in the way. With all that said, let's do what we do. Who's open for business? Who's open for business? Like, who are the teams that are going to be looking to make moves? I think sort of as we head into trade season, we're 6 weeks away, less than 6 weeks away from the early February trade deadline, and as we get closer, I think some of these rumors will crystallize, some of these will fade away, but it's important to consider if you're concocting sort of what moves to look for, or how it might impact the Blazers. Who are buyers, who are sellers, who is like realistically on the market. Although I think it is fun just to like cook up nonsense anyways. But Sam Amick today in The Athletic reported, as others have, including Jake Fisher of the Steinline about more than a week ago, that pretty much the Kings are fully open for business. And Sam Amick reiterated that as well. It's like pretty much everybody on the of veteran on the roster. That includes Domantas Sabonis, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, Russell Westbrook, if there's any buyers, but I can't imagine there would be. All of those players are going to be available. The Kings are one of the teams that is absolutely unequivocally open for business. Jake Fisher reported a week ago that everybody not named Keegan Murray or Nick Clifford could be had. Amick says, while the veterans probably don't have much of a market based on their sort of overall talent level and more importantly probably their price tag, specifically for Zach LaVine, just paid too much money, even though he is pretty darn talented, but just not at his price tag. Like the more sought after Kings player is Keon Ellis, although the asking price, because he's more sought after, is a little bit higher. Although I do think, because of his contract situation entering free agency, maybe the Kings do end up having to move him because they don't want to re-sign him, but also they could just re-sign him, right? They could just pay him. We shall see. So the Kings are absolutely open for business. Jake Fisher reported that, the Nets would be open to trading Michael Porter Jr. Yeah, of course. It's a high-priced veteran. They're just on a different sort of timeline than him. He was actually really, really good to begin the year for the Nets. So unsurprisingly, they would be willing to trade him. We will see what he nets what he nets for the Nets. What he could garner on the market. I will say, the Nuggets had to trade MPJ and a first-round pick to get Cam Johnson. So I can't imagine that Michael Porter Jr. at his standalone value has a ton. Jake Fisher also reported that Colin Sexton in Charlotte could be moved, although he notes that the sort of the Hornets, as of late December, are kind of like, hey, we might be a postseason team, and we haven't been that in a long time, so they're not as open for business in terms of full teardown, but veteran guard Colin Sexton could be had. And even before that, back on December 21st, Mark Stein of the Steinline reported that add the Chicago Bulls to the list of folks that are open for business. He mentioned that, trade deadline is February 5th. That stuff really heats up maybe the 2 weeks beforehand, and particularly that sort of week of the deadline is when things get humming. Typically there's like one or two trades maybe early on, but we haven't seen that yet. So maybe everything will stall out, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later in the show. But Stein, back on December 21st, reported that the Bulls, probably for the first time since they have had Kobe White on the roster, are open to trading White. And Sam Amick reported today on December 31st that the Bulls are pretty much all of their expiring contracts. Everybody. So that's Ayo Dosunmu, that's Nikola Vucevic, that's Kevin Huerter. They will be shopped to some extent. Whether they'll be moved, the Bulls are certainly open to trading any of those guys who are set to hit free agency this summer. And finally, the last team. So that's the Kings seem to be willing to make moves. The Bulls seem willing to make moves. Some like lesser teams like Charlotte and the Nets. I was going to call them New Jersey. That's from a long time ago. Charlotte and Brooklyn are at least, have some veterans that they'd be willing to sort of move at the right price. But the last team that seems just like destined to make a move is although they won this afternoon, the somewhat underachieving and decidedly mediocre Atlanta Hawks, a darling for many in the preseason as a team that was ready to break out, but they could not overcome being the Hawks and just being a team destined to play in the Eastern play-in. And they've been decisively mediocre. They've probably been worse when Trae Young plays, and kind of that's where the Hawks find themselves, willing to make moves in both directions, as it turns out. So on December 29th, on the Hoop Collective podcast on ESPN, Tim McMahon reported that the Hawks are indicating that they will look for an exit ramp with Trae Young. McMahon went on to note that there's not a vast group of teams that are vying to employ Trae Young, and particularly because he has a $40 million player option for next season, but he would be looking for an extension. So you're either, having Young opt into a $40 million contract or agreeing to pay him, probably more a raise and multiple years at that price. And I think there is some hesitation across the league, at least from McMahon's reporting, whether adding Young at that price would be palatable, and if it were palatable, what would the trade package have to be? And it's I think there's just not a big market for what Young is now. At one point, it looked like he was going to be a super duper star, and now he's just good. He's an excellent passer, bad defender, and comes with a big price tag. But McMahon reports the Hawks are probably out on the Trae Young business, and if they could find a way to trade him before the deadline, he didn't specify specifically that, but you can read the tea leaves there. If they could find a way to trade him, they're looking for one, certainly. So not only are the Hawks looking to trade their one-time franchise icon as they sort of move forward to a new era, probably anchored more by Jalen Johnson, the man most actively vying for most improved player against Deni Avdija. Should be a great rivalry. I don't think they care, but fans should care greatly, right? I don't know. You should care about what you care about. But Johnson versus Avdija, who's the most improved player in the league? They both have been very good this year. So the Hawks are willing to move off of Trae, but they're also maybe willing to chase another big name on the market. On Christmas Day, we got some reporting that the Hawks are in business, or at least legitimately interested in acquiring Anthony frickin' Davis? Huh? That's a surprise. Let's talk about that and whether Trae Young would have to be involved in a Anthony Davis deal and what that might mean for Atlanta, as well as the rest of the league, as maybe the Mavs are headed for a shakeup. Join me in that second segment. We will talk about just that. Before we do, though, let's talk FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel is giving fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. So from 6 to 7:30 Eastern Time, it's appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. That's 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time. You open that FanDuel app during the Happy Hour window, and there's going to be something new. Boosts, bonuses, and surprises. You can check those weekly specials before tip-off and then join the window before it closes and make your picks. Timing's perfect. Right before games and then right before the weekend starts. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 3 to 4:30 Pacific Time. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right. The Hawks are in business for Anthony Davis? Maybe? Before we get there, though, I want to remind you, if you do listen to this show every single day, if you are truly an everydayer and you were waiting, like, where is that episode on Wednesday? I was promised, Mike. Join the Everydayer Club first. Offer a little grace for your boy. Then join the Everydayer Club. You get an ad-free feed for this podcast, so you get an uninterrupted version of Locked On Blazers. You get access to our members-only Discord, where you can chat with me and your fellow Blazer fans. It's $5 a month, $50 a year. You can go to lockedonblazers.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes for more. Yes, indeed, the Hawks in business for Anthony Davis. Woo-hoo, that's an interesting one, because it would also suggest a direction for the Mavericks, who would be in for a teardown, and also the Hawks kind of like continuing to go for it. And because Anthony Davis is extension eligible in August, and according to Mark Stein, very much interested in getting that extension. Surprise, surprise, NBA player wants to get paid. But like, trading for Anthony Davis means you are paying Anthony Davis, right? You are committing to multiple years of Anthony Davis. And I think that comes with some inherent risk just because of his availability over the years. When he plays, he's very good. He doesn't play very much. But that was first reported by Chris Haynes on the NBA Prime's pregame show on Christmas Day. The final game of the night was on Prime. Haynes comes on Prime and says the Hawks are, quote, very intrigued by the prospect of trading for Anthony Davis. I find that one pretty fascinating. And Haynes went on to say that if the Hawks do make that deal, it wouldn't be for Trae Young. That's even more surprising, because having Young and Anthony Davis on the roster makes them pretty darn expensive and could kind of put them in a weird spot. As Mark Stein of the Steinline points out, they could, the Hawks are willing to trade former first overall pick Zachary Reese-Sachet. They would trade the expiring contracts of Kristaps Porzingis and Luke Kennard, and they could get there, but they would have to, that's money wise, and then you'd have to sort of make the draft capital work. The Hawks, of course, control this juicy pick that's New Orleans Pelicans' unprotected pick, and like, they're not willing to trade that. They're not willing to trade Jalen Johnson for Davis or a potential Giannis Antetokounmpo trade. So the Hawks, like, how much of their other draft capital would they be willing to put in the mix to get Anthony Davis, and how much draft capital would the Mavs, who would be pivoting off the Luka trade entirely to the next era, sort of demand to save face, and if they could find a deal that works. But it strikes me that the Hawks are just ready to make big changes. They're ready to trade Trae Young, and you would assume if they trade for Anthony Davis, they trade for Trae Young in a separate trade, or maybe a large 3-team trade or a multi-team trade, that moves all of those parts around if they can find a deal to work it. So like, the Hawks they're a team to watch, right? They're a team to absolutely watch, because while they don't want to trade their sort of coveted draft pick assets, they do seem to be in the market, sort of more broadly speaking, for a lot of big names. And if those dominoes fall, other teams can kind of get in the mix here and there to make salary matching work, to kind of to smooth things over, to absorb contracts that other teams don't want, to take players that other teams don't want. I think those bigger trades typically can sort of end up swallowing up other franchises into the mix. Even for minor deals, you say, okay, yeah, let's get in on this one. So I think what the Hawks do is kind of like a big pivot point for the entire trade market. Speaking of the Hawks and Giannis Antetokounmpo and the pick they're not going to trade for Giannis, they don't want to trade Jalen Johnson. They don't want to trade that pick. Johnson's awesome. He's just really, really good, and that pick is really, really juicy. It makes sense. You don't want to trade your sort of two best parts if you don't have to yet. But it seemed like the Hawks were maybe at one point sort of like the fulcrum in the Giannis deal, right? They seem to be the sort of that, again, like the fulcrum, the pivot point for the whole market. But it does seem like this sort of Giannis trade chatter has calmed down a little bit. The reports from Eric Name of The Athletic earlier in December, and then reiterated again on December 31st by Sam Amick, also of The Athletic, is that the Bucks are just kind of angling not for a rebuild, but they'd like to get better if they could. Like they would add players to get better, because while they've struggled a bunch this season, they look at the bottom of the East and they say, well, we can get to the play-in. We can probably get out of the play-in if Giannis plays and we keep hooping. And even like if we get hot, like we could move up to, fifth. We could get out of the play-in. We could even have a puncher's chance with some good luck going their way to be a home court advantage team in the playoffs. They're not like they're far down the standings right now. They're not a playing team, but like when Giannis plays, they're good. And I think from the reporting from both local beat writer Eric Name and national writer Sam Amick is like, yeah, they feel like they could be a team that makes a move and is more successful this year. And they're probably not ready to necessarily part with Giannis until he really openly demands it. And Giannis has been, in my opinion, kind of awkwardly not able to do that, even though it seems very clearly that privately he is ready to do something else. So I would say that big, like the sort of the eye of Sauron that travels over NBA rumor mill has kind of shifted off of Giannis, maybe more towards the Trae Youngs and Anthony Davises of the world. Also, sort of like this time of year, it's important to pay close attention. This is why, like, I know so many folks, and I'm not, if this is how you do things, whatever, like that's life. But like so many folks get their sort of news from like a graphic posted on Instagram or some nonsense. It's just like a sentence, and it's like, oh, there. But like, I think reading closely how the reports are written are really important, because there were some reports from Sam Amick and also from Jake Fisher of the Stein line that like other teams were speculating that James Harden could be traded, and so that wasn't reporting from inside the house, right? That was teams looking at the outside and be like, hey, the Clippers are 6-21. Like, this team is a mess. And James Harden is still, for all of his faults, like a very good player. He was a very good player last year. He's been statistically a very good player this year. He's got some warts, but he's like a hooper. He's not their problem necessarily. I think it's all the players that aren't James Harden and Kawhi Leonard that have been the problem for the Clippers. Those two dudes have been fine. And they're hooping now. Kawhi's been on one. He looks like one of the best players in the league all of a sudden. And how long he keeps that up is always a question with him, but he's been really good. But both Fisher and Amick reported like other teams were kind of like circling the wagons on the Clippers. And like, are they going to trade James? Like, are they going to be bad enough that James Harden's like, get me out of here, and they acquiesce, and like all of a sudden there's like a really good veteran ball handler on the market that could shake up a team. Obviously Harden is like, you got to kind of play the way he plays to make it work, but an interesting big name that could be traded. But now the reporting from Amick on December 31st is that the Clippers, much like the Bucks before them, are kind of signaling the other way, is that they're certainly like, they feel like they can climb in the standings. They're looking at the bottom of the West and like, shoot, we're not scared of Memphis and Phoenix and Portland. Like, you can get past those teams, and they might be able to. They can stay healthy. They're talented, but they're a team that also would prefer to add talent as opposed to be sellers. So, who are the buyers then? There's not a lot of teams that seem to be like really actively shopping players outside of like the sort of unwanteds in Sacramento. The buyers seem to be like the Clippers seem to be buyers. Everyone always reports like the Lakers are buyers. They just don't like, how are the Lakers going to make a move? What parts do they have to trade? I don't get it. I think the Lakers are aspirational buyers, but I think another team you put in the aspirational buyers category here is Minnesota. They need a point guard, and they've been linked to some of the buzzier point guards. It's like, oh, maybe they're exploratory interest in Ja Morant, as reported by Mark Stein earlier in December, there's been some reporting from Jake Fisher back on December 23rd that like they've also kicked the tires on how could they acquire Kobe White, or how could they acquire Colin Sexton from Charlotte. But as noted in a December 29th report from Jake Fisher, it's like, a December 29th report from Mark Stein. They write for the same newsletter, but Stein's like noted this, like because the Wolves don't want to trade Jaden McDaniels, and because they don't really want to trade Julius Randle, and they don't really want to trade Naz Reid, they just finding a deal that actually realistically works for them is pretty hard. So the idea that they could add someone that isn't just kind of like Chris Paul at the minimum after he gets traded somewhere else and then bought out, it seems unlikely. So I want to close here, and then we'll shift to the Blazers in the final segment of the show. Is like Stein pointed out in a piece that he wrote on December 29th, is that, and he's mentioned this about Anthony Davis, and I think it holds true for and includes more Giannis Antetokounmpo in Milwaukee, and I think it holds true for Trae Young as well. Is that waiting to the offseason and the sort of more fluidity and the word that Stein uses is optionality that summer typically provides. That's a direct quote. Optionality that summer typically provides is perhaps the preferred course for trading stars, for trading Giannis, for trading AD, for trading Trae Young. I think like what the real truth is that in the new CBA, concocting big money trades with the salary matching rules and some of the apron challenges that the most competitive teams with the most expensive rosters have, is that trading stars in the league is harder now, and it just is easier in the summertime when rosters can be a little fudged a little bit because you don't have to finalize everything, and because teams will all of a sudden have magical access to more draft picks because you're into a new league year, as opposed to when in season you just have what you have. Like the Bucks, for instance, can trade 1 draft pick now, but when they get to the summertime can trade 3. So like that's first round picks. So like it is. It might just mean that we head into this, when there's rumors swirling around Anthony Davis and Trae Young and Giannis Antetokounmpo, like when there are some big names that could be had, is that just like the reality of the league is that those deals are easier to make in the summertime. And so none of these things happen. And we see, we might still see a flurry of trades, but just not with the biggest names that we are discussing now. But this is a Trailblazers podcast, and so I want to close ostensibly, and so I want to close talking about the Blazers. Like they don't factor in very clearly in any of the stuff I've mentioned, but what would they do, or how could they get involved in trade action? Let's talk about that to close the show. Join me in that third segment, won't ya? First, though, let's talk game time. It's the NBA season. You know the deal. There's nothing like being in the building, getting in the arena, feeling the energy, the crowd, that first big run that gets everybody on their feet. If you're a fan, you want to be there for those moments, not stuck refreshing screens or guessing what tickets are really going to cost. That's where Game Time comes in. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage back, making it incredibly easy to score amazing tickets, fast, simple, and without the guesswork. What I like about the Game Time app is it's straightforward and intuitive. So you can find tickets in a few snaps. If you're looking for tickets to, say, the Portland Trailblazers when they're back in town next week, pull up your phone. First of all, it'll know that you're in Portland. But if you're not in Portland and you're coming visiting, type in the Portland Trailblazers. The Moda Center, map of the Moda Center will come up on your phone. You are looking exactly where you're going to sit in the arena. What you see is what you get pricing. There's no surprise fees at checkout. So when you're browsing, exactly what you see right there on the screen is what you're going to pay when you go to buy stuff. Plus, if you've never been to the Moda Center before, they got 360 panoramic views. So you can click on the seat and say, what's it going to look like? And they have a shot in the arena to show you exactly what the court's going to look like from those seats. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app. Get in on the action. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond. You're still listening to Locked On Blazers. So we talked all this trade rumor stuff, that there's teams that want to be buyers, there's some challenges, there's some hurdles, there's some teams that want to be sellers, but they're not selling great stuff, and there are some obvious potential movers, the Kobe Whites, Colin Sextons, everyone who plays for the Kings that's not named Keegan Murray to monitor, right? But where the Portland Trailblazers sort of fit into this puzzle, I don't think is abundantly clear. They're not, I think a couple things. One, they're sort of most obviously tradable players are the expiring guys. It's Rob Williams and Matisse Thybulle. They could trade anyone effectively. There's a little bit of challenge with trading the recently extended guys, Toumani Camara, who they won't trade, and Shaedon Sharpe, who they won't trade. But conceivably, we can trade everybody on the roster. They could make it happen. The problem is with it's called the poison pill, and we won't even get into it because they're not going to trade those guys. But those other than that, it's just who do they have to trade that has real interesting value on the market? In theory, Drew Holiday would have, but I don't think at his price point he was ever going to be a bunch, and then he's missed all this time, right? There's been some speculation that Jeremy Grant has sort of recouped some of his value with playing really well at the beginning of the year, but he's missed a bunch of time. And to be clear, I think those injuries are totally real. I think the problem is not that the Blazers are secretly holding those guys out to be tradable. I think the problem is that the Blazers are just really bad at communicating and don't value it in any meaningful way. They either don't get it or don't care about it, or a combination of both. I'm not buying any of the conspiracy stuff on the injuries. So like when you're really talking about who's the most tradable Blazers players, talking about the expiring, talking about Rob Williams or Matisse Thybulle. Obviously, Thybulle has somehow been less available than Rob Williams over the past season and a half. He missed almost all of last year. He got hurt after 4 games this year and has not returned. And I thought Thybulle would be back before anybody else because his is a thumb injury, not like a soft tissue thing. I'm surprised this one is lingering, but again, we don't get updates. And when you ask the coach for updates, he's like, I wish I could tell you more. I got nothing. They're just not ready. And you say, what are they doing? He said, they're going through workouts. They're not ready. It's just, there's very little info. So like while I do think Rob and Matisse, particularly Rob, would have some trade value, not like super juicy trade value. You're talking second round picks, salary matching second round picks. That's realistically what you're talking about here. And so I think like the safest bet is the Blazers don't make a move because they don't have super tradable players and they don't have these like big goals to chase. Like I think the Blazers are kind of comfortable chasing a play-in spot this year. And I think it's for a few reasons. Like why I don't think they're going to make a move is one, their history of making in-season moves under the sort of like after the teardown of the roster in the Joe Cronin era. It's just not how they've operated, right? They're either patient or stubborn or both. And again, like you have to have stuff you want to get rid of to make deals. You got to trade good stuff to get good stuff, right? And they have not, they don't necessarily have that on the roster right now. Like the things that they have that would bring back value in a trade are not players they want to trade, right? It's like, you could trade Denny Avdia for a haul. They obviously don't want to do that, right? For some obvious reasons. He's good and on the cheap on the low, but I think they're kind of comfortable chasing in the middle for a few reasons. One, I just think from like a business and vibes perspective, not actively trying to lose, so not like tearing down the roster and getting rid of your good players. Like, oh, get Jeremy out of here, get Drew out of here, let's chase a draft pick. It's just like it's better for the coaching staff, it's better for the players, and it's better for the paying customers. And I think from a business and vibes perspective, that they don't want to like have the stadium be empty and kind of like crush morale when they're on a season when they were trying to take steps forward, not backwards. Although this might end up somewhat lateral. I also think like realistically, even if they did bail really hard right now in the season and like committed to the tank, they might not be able to catch the teams at the bottom. Like the bottom 4 teams in the league, Sacramento, New Orleans, Washington, and Indiana, like those teams are bad. Those are bad basketball teams. And Sacramento might be actively trying to get worse. They're bad to begin with and might be trying to get worse. Like, they could get maybe close, but I don't know that they could like surpass those teams. And like racing down to 5th might not appeal to them, right? Because then you get the bad vibes and the nobody's buying tickets. Plus, you don't even get the payoff. You're not even going to have one of the 3 worst records or 4 worst records in the league. So I think that folds into the mix. I think similarly, same vein is like, I think the Blazers and many teams in the league are probably somewhat emboldened by the flattened lottery odds. It's like you see, the Hawks jump up and win the lottery. We've seen teams with the worst record in the league rarely win the lottery during the flattened odds. Like I don't believe any team with the true worst record has straight up won the lottery since they changed the odds in 2019. Although some teams have picked pretty high. Shout out to the Detroit Pistons and Cade Cunningham. I think getting the first pick probably helped them a little bit. But like, so they probably feel emboldened in some sense that like the difference in, it's flat enough that finishing, like if you miss the playoffs, you still got a decent enough chance to get Cooper flags like the Dallas Mavericks. Although my real conspiracy heads will know that was obviously handed to the Mavericks. I don't believe that, but some of y'all do. And so, they're emboldened by the flat and lottery odds. And then finally, like, I do think if they do get healthy, like if everybody gets back at some point, and who knows, right? But if they get back and they do start winning and they kind of like fall backwards into 8th, right? They make the play-in, they win a couple single elimination games, or one, depending on where they finish in the standings. But if they win one or more single elimination play-in games, and they do end up in the playoff bracket, then they're out of a first-round pick debt owed to the Bulls. They'd give their pick to Chicago, that debt would be over, and they can move forward without that debt sort of hanging over them with a little more optionality to trade picks into the future. So, like, if they do make the playoffs, great. There's some real value there. 1, it means you won games. 2, you get to like sell some playoff tickets. You get to talk about like how important it was to play competitive basketball games while Oklahoma City beats the snot out of you in the first round. And then you can pat yourself in the back about that. And then then you don't have that pick hanging over you to the Bulls. So there's like real upside there. I don't think they can tank enough to catch the bad teams. I don't think they're too worried about getting those good lottery odds because they're just like, they've seen the way, although that's not really how math works. I think there's just like across the league, it seems to be the belief that like, hey, it could happen. Why chase it? Like, you could be the Jazz. You could be the worst team in the league and just miserable, and you pick fifth, and it's like is that a real reward? And so I think for all of those reasons, because the Blazers are kind of like, I would say maybe not content is probably not the right word, because they probably want to be a little bit better and certainly a lot healthier. They probably are not likely to be sellers. Like, I would say very, very little chance. I'd probably put it at less than 1% chance that they're like true sellers. And if they can be, they'll be opportunistic buyers at the market, in the trade market. But if I had to guess, they're not going to get in on the mix because they don't necessarily have great trade pieces, and they are they're not sort of in the go for it mode just yet. Like, they're not in the like, hey, let's add a player and really, really chase it, because they're kind of out of that like true playoff contention range where it wouldn't make sense to cash in your assets just yet, because they're still, growing to what they might be in the future. At some point you do have to, take your bigger swings, but I don't think they're there yet. And my read on it is that they won't be. So that's your trade rumor show, coming out a little bit late. Tell your friends about the podcast. If you are everydayer, if you did like legitimately miss this podcast because it's coming out, I don't know, 9 hours later than it usually does, 10 hours later than it usually does, join the Everydayer Club. $5 a month, $50 a year. You get ad-free, uninterrupted version of the audio feed for this episode, plus access to the members-only Discord, plus some other member benefits. LockedOnBlazers.supercast.com. The link is in the show notes for this episode. Come back for tomorrow's show. We will talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder, where the game has already tipped off as I'm recording this in OKC. So I got to go catch up with that one, and then I will record another podcast because I love y'all. Tell your friends about the show. I appreciate you listening. I will talk to you soon.